I've done a few videos in the past about our Christian heritage, especially with an emphasis on music and architecture and liturgy. And it's given me the opportunity to receive some feedback from commenters on my videos, as well as some personal conversations I've had. So I wanted to take the opportunity to reply to some of those sentiments. But before I do, I want to dispel this attitude that's out there that says that this kind of thing isn't worth talking about. I mean, it's just music, it's just architecture. As long as we all love Jesus and he loves us, this kind of stuff should just be on the back shelf. I want to share an anecdote that I got from my friend Dr. Ryan Topping's wonderful book, Rebuilding Catholic Culture. In it, he talks about Vladimir the Great, and that he was living in a time when he realized that the paganism that had been part of his ancestry and the Slavic people no longer held the interest and the hearts of his people. And so he sent out these envoys to neighboring regions to learn about the other religions that were popular there. One of those envoys went to Greece, where they were invited to participate in the Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. And this is what they reported back to Vladimir. They said that then we went to Greece, and the Greeks led us to the edifices where they worshiped their God, and we knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth. For on earth there is no such splendor or such beauty, and we are at a loss to describe it. We only know that God dwells there among men, and their service is fairer than the ceremonies of other nations, for we cannot forget that beauty. It was following that report that Vladimir adopted Christianity, and the evangelization and Christianization of the Kievan Rus, or like the Slavic and Russian people that we know of today, took place. That's amazing. These diplomats entered into a worship scenario that they probably didn't understand what was going on or the words that were being spoken, but it was so undeniably beautiful to them that they couldn't help but believe that God was there, because it was so transcendent and so otherworldly compared to anything else that they had ever experienced in this life. So if liturgy and the way that we worship has the potential to produce an outcome where we see one of the most vast cultural landscapes transformed by Christianity, respectfully, I do think it matters. One argument that I've seen out there and have had addressed to me is that the church has a rich history of recognizing what is good in the culture around it and adopting that in and making it its own, a sort of baptizing of secular and pagan practices. And that's why, therefore, the argument goes, it's perfectly fine for the church to adopt aspects of popular culture and integrate them into the way that we worship. And this is partially true. The church has drawn from cultural influences in the past, and there are many disciplines and practices that are associated with traditional Catholicism, for example, that would not be familiar to the early church. So one example is ancestor worship, which was common in pagan cultures. And the church recognized that we have this need to learn from those who have gone before us, especially those who have left behind a deposit of prosperity and virtue and knowledge. But that's not the whole picture. So the church related this to those pagan cultures by telling them about the communion of saints. But notice that this is an example of the church taking something that was out there and elevating it so that it is something that is more good and more true and more compatible with Christianity, not opposed to it, and certainly not less good. That's a really key thing that I think I'm going to come back to in this. Another example would be something like the Roman Basilica, these were places of public gathering, and the church adopted that concept in its architecture for how it designed cathedrals and Roman Catholic basilicas. They took something that was there and they made it something better. But what we have in your average Catholic parish today is not an example where we're taking something in, like say folk music, and making it something more good or more true or more beautiful and more Christian, but instead we're just integrating it and actually reducing its appeal. Like, I've never flipped on a Christian radio station and listened to some Christian rock or pop or hip hop or whatever it happens to be and thought that it was nearly as good as what happens to be on the secular radio station right next door. It's always kind of a second-rate version of what is already out there. So this is an example like the other ones where we're adopting something in and making it better. It's an example where we're taking something that is arguably unsuited for Christian worship and just making it worse.
The renewed mind is the key to the power that we need. The world is gonna see that it's Christ in me.
More than that though, the popular music of today is something that finds its appeal in novelty and fashion. It's the offspring of an art establishment that has fully embraced the philosophy of modernism, which is where we get ideas like beauty is in the eye of the beholder from. In other words, beauty is defined by your subjective tastes and preferences. You create and you define what is beauty. And this idea is utterly incompatible with Christianity, which has always taught that God is beauty, and therefore beauty is objective, not subjective. Beauty exists outside and apart from your subjective preferences or tastes. And this brings me to another really popular argument that is out there, which is a plea to this relativistic idea that we should all just go and find whatever happens to suit our preferences and tastes. If I happen to like chant, then I should go find a Latin mass. If someone else happens to like folk music, then they should go to a typical Novus Ordo. If someone else happens to like third-rate 80s rock ballads, then they should go to a youth mass. Okay. Let's say for the sake of argument that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with this line of reasoning. Isn't the church universal? Like, what is the likelihood that the parish in my neighborhood, which is where I'm supposed to go, is going to succeed in this method in trying to appeal to my subjective tastes? And if it doesn't, does that mean that I just have to drive halfway across the city to find something that I do like? I'm just out of luck, I'm not welcome here? Or maybe more importantly, what's the likelihood that this approach is going to find appeal and resonate with our youth? Are we actually so naive that we think that we could produce something that would appeal to their sense of popular music? And if the unlikely event occurs that we actually do succeed in that, is there going to be anything recognizably Christian left in it? If the church is universal and is an equal opportunity welcome for all people based on something objective, which is God, shouldn't we be trying to avoid presentations of the faith that only appeal to certain cultural persuasions that will at most probably only resonate with like 10 to 20% of the people who might come? Because at the end of the day, we do have to choose one thing. We have to choose one song for a particular portion. So what kind of song is it going to be? And this is why traditional sacred music is such a good fit, because it doesn't depend on fashions or trends or cultural persuasions or subjective taste, and is therefore universal. Here's the thing. Liturgy is not entertainment. Your religion does not exist to amuse you. In the case of Christianity, your religion is an immersion into the death and resurrection of the second person of the divine Trinity for the expiation of human evil. I don't know how you look at something like that and say, well, as long as they're playing my kind of music, then maybe I'll get into it. People who advocate for traditional liturgy aren't doing it because it best reflects their taste in music. They're doing it because they recognize that God is beauty, as has always been taught by the church, and therefore beauty is objective. Your taste is irrelevant. Instead of trying to enforce our own particular preferences onto everyone else, we should be trying to discover what is beauty, who is God, and what does that look like? And then we should be trying to transform ourselves based on God's standard, not ours. Which means that for some of us, that might mean that we will encounter something like traditional liturgy that has been around for centuries and centuries and centuries, and maybe we won't like it. That doesn't matter. There are teachings that have been given to us by God that some of us will encounter for the first time and say, I don't know if I want to do that. It doesn't matter. That is what is objectively good and true, and we are supposed to be transformed by it. We don't transform the standard. I didn't become Catholic because it happened to appeal to my tastes. The 1,500 person strong young adult ministry at the Pentecostal church that I was going to was way more appealing to me than anything that the Catholic Church was doing in my city. I became Catholic because I believe it's true. And likewise, I want to find a liturgical experience that best reflects what is good and true and beautiful. Again, beauty is objective, which means that not all expressions of it are equal. Some better correspond to that objective reality than others. And if we have to choose between the options that are out there, for my part, my money is on the one that was given to us by a church that consistently taught that beauty is objective and hadn't embraced this subjective reality and this cult of relativism. And secondly, it's on the one that held captive the hearts and imagination of Christians for centuries. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that, then please consider subscribing and liking, and come find me on Facebook and Twitter. It's a huge help when you do that. It helps us get these videos in front of more and more people. And a big thank you goes out to You Catholic for presenting these videos. And if you want to support the making of these videos, then please consider supporting my work as a digital media and marketing expert. My company, Holdsworth Design, specializes in branding, web and graphic design, marketing, social media, videography, and all that kind of good stuff. So if you know of a parish, a diocese, a ministry, or a business that needs help in those areas, then please send them our way, and I'm sure we can help them out.